All right. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for attending the Energy Bites today. My name is Andres. I am a master's student here at the Energy and Efficiency Institute at UC Davis. And I'm also part of the Green Engineering Materials and Systems group led by Professor Savi Miller at UC Davis as well. My talk today will cover the decarbonization of building materials. And my objective is to communicate why it is so important to reduce the CO2 emissions stemming from this industry, which are often overlooked. I personally was not familiar with this issue when I first came to UC Davis, but now I've learned so much and I'm so proud of that, and I decided to share a bit of my work with you. First, my motivation, and I believe many of you share it with me, is to tackle the threat of climate change. As many of you know, if we do not limit the global warming to well below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the whole planet will face dreadful consequences. This translates to, if we do not disrupt business as usual practices in many sectors, we will be following that orange line and we are not going to meet the target. A way to avoid following that line is to follow instead CO2 reduction pathways and to transition to a low carbon economy. The building industry has come under increasing scrutiny under the last few years due to its large environmental impacts. Let me give you a bigger picture. Materials production is responsible for about 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And the demand for such materials, food, energy, is ever growing. And thus, the greenhouse gas emissions associated with their production are increasing as well. From 1995 to 2015, the building industry produced around, increased by 120% its greenhouse gas emissions. And in 2015 alone, they produced 11 billion tons of CO2. Out of 11 gigatons or billion tons, 6 correspond to building materials exclusively, with the majority of them stemming from concrete production, steel production, and limestone. Right? And with the population growing at unprecedented rates, the demand for such materials keeps increasing, and the rate of urbanization deals with this. Specifically, concrete is the most widely used synthetic material in the world, and as a material itself, just behind water. So that is really impressive. And as I mentioned, this responds to the high rate of urbanization. We hit 11 billion people in 2022, and we're gonna still growing. It is expected that 1 billion people, more people, will move to urban areas requiring more infrastructure and the upgrade of aging systems. With that, that corresponds also to affluence, the GDP raised every year. So all of these explanations conclude the fact that our impacts are a function of the population, the affluence, and the technology, which is also known as the IPAT equation. Now, I would like you to focus on the fact that the building industry, it's a difficult to evade sector. It doesn't matter many of the timelines or the time frames because we have to devise more environmentally friendly materials and disrupt the business as usual, which is really hard in the building industry. So it is really important to understand the interconnectedness of building materials and other factors in order to remove those CO2 emissions. First, the building materials are necessary to construct structures and provide services. And we need energy to produce those building materials and to supply energy to the structures and the services. At the same time, we demand some resources. And those structures allows us to produce energy as well. In doing so, we generate waste, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollutants, and all of those impact the environment, which in turn impacts our health and our water resources. So that is why it's really important to address those CO2 emissions. The reason why it's hard to abate It's because we still need to consider our primal needs, our services. If you devise a new material, is it capable of replacing the material you were using before? If you reduce the demand, are you still supplying all the infrastructure you need? So it is really important to consider all the functional aspect of the materials. And for that, building materials life cycle assessment comes in play. In building materials, we usually assess cradle to gate life cycle emissions because we would like to compare the production stage, and also because they have inactive nature during the use and services and the retirement and recovery phases. So we limit ourselves to a cradle to gate analysis of those greenhouse gas emissions. And let me give you basically a flowchart of how cement is produced. First, we use limestone and clay combined, and we burn them in a kiln at about 1500 degrees Celsius using fossil fuels. So we are burning fossil fuels to basically decarbonate limestone. And limestone is calcium carbonate in its majority. Calcium carbonate, when heated, releases CO2 as well. So we're burning fossil fuels to release more CO2. That's why it's so important here. Then it is cooled and it's grinded, combined with gypsum, and then transported to batch plants. And I would like to present some decarbonization strategies for this concrete. First, if we apply energy efficiency to the kilns, and if we switch some of the processes to renewable energy, say 100% wind power, we will be able to reduce 4% of the greenhouse gas emissions, which is really low. If we switch our fuels to biomass or to natural gas, we will be able to reduce about up to 30%. If we reduce clinker, which is concrete's main component, comes from the limestone, it's going to be able to reduce about 35%. If we use alternative clay materials, 40%. And this is a very innovative material, alkali activated materials. They are waste-derived products that can abate up to 88%. Using CCS, which is not ready as of right now for the building industry, 87%. Now let's focus on the cradle-to-gate analysis of steel manufacturing. There are two main routes for producing steel, the blast furnace route and the electric arc furnace. The raw materials, limestone, iron ore, coal, they need pre-processing, and then they are fed to the blast furnace to obtain molten iron. Then for electric arc furnace, which represents less energy consumption, we use recycled steel scrap directly to the furnace, and then we can produce, after some refining, steel products. In the sense of steel decarbonization, we have many options as well. For example, increasing the use of recycled scrap steel up to 58% of potential to abate GHG emissions. However, this deals with how good is your scrap? What's the quality of that scrap? It's often like combined with copper, and that is a problem for the market. Also, we have near net shape casting, which is directly casting in a shape where we want the final product to be in, instead of hot rolling it. Then we have top gas recycling. We can reuse the top gases of the blast furnace and avoid the use of more coke. Smelting reduction process with carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. This is another technique that basically reduces also the need for more coke. And one of the most important ones is shifting from blast furnace to electric arc furnace, which entails basically electrification of the furnaces. And if we use renewable energy, or if we are able to also incorporate some other fuels like hydrogen and natural gas, we can have important savings. I will present a case study now of applying these techniques to a data center. As you know, as we increase the need for cloud computing, artificial intelligence, data mining, data centers are proliferating all across the world. And in this case, we are studying how to decarbonize the envelope of a data center. The square footage is 240,000 square foot, and you have other details. We use cradle to gate life cycle assessment based on open concrete tool developed in our group. It's a software tool and also an LCA software called SIMA Pro. The functional units are the materials used in the construction of a 25-year lifespan warehouses. So we're focusing on the production stage. We developed some scenarios for this decarbonization. First, business as usual for concrete, which is 100% of Portland cement. 30% of the steel comes from blast furnace, 70% from EAF, and 100% of conventional walls and roofing systems. Now, if we change the Portland cement and reduce the amount of clinker to 70% and 30% fly ash, all the rest is the same. Then we change that for concrete, obtaining LC3. LC3 is limestone, calcine, clay cement. It's an alternative for traditional concrete. And we combine that with 100% electric arc furnace and 100% electric arc furnace with renewable energy and a decarbonized system for walls and roofing systems. That is not part of my work exactly, but we do that in our group. And we were able to decarbonize the envelope by 14% by just reducing 30% of the clinker of the Portland cement in the concrete. We doubled that by incorporating electric arc furnace. And basically, the most important reduction here was obtained by decarbonizing the walls and the roofing system, transitioning from concrete-based walls and roof systems to wood-based roofed and cellulose-based insulation panels. And the last part of my work at UC Davis has dealt with using machine learning in LCA. This is more innovative. LCA is very formulaic, but if you have performed LCAs before, you know that getting the data is really difficult. So we are using right now machine learning techniques to predict those missing inventories, those missing flows, or those missing characterization factors. And it's starting to be a thing in LCA. We have a data set. This is just an example of biochar. And we had many of the characteristics of the slow pyrolysis to convert the biomass to biochar. And with that, just applying machine learning, we were able to predict many of the properties we need to predict the CO2 emissions. For example, the biochar yield or the biochar energy content. Here we use random forest, super vector regression, and artificial neural networks to predict that. But it's just an example of what we're doing right now, what is my research right now. And well, that's all I wanted to share today. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions? Yes.
On that case study where you showed the reduction in that envelope of the data center, did you guys have any cost, like to move from scenario 1 to scenario 6, right? If cost is X for scenario 1, what is 6 for a building out of that, roughly?
So roughly, if I recall correctly, it's about twice as expensive.
So 2X. Okay.
Yeah, 2X. And also, you do not control the decarbonization of the electricity grid. Like, as a user, you have to expect the utilities to do that for you or the electricity generators. So that is, yeah, an ideal scenario, basically.
2X for a half
Yep.
emissions reduction.
Yeah. Yes.
Just to clarify that, that's just producing the envelope.
Yes, just producing the envelope, not the energy used during the operation of the data center. Oh, yes.
Are there projections for concrete demand in California going forward? And I guess my question is, do we ever get to where we're not in a big infrastructure growth state anymore? You know, we're not building as many high-rise buildings and bridges and stuff like that. They stuff well. Is it flattening out or increasing exponentially?
I would say it's flattening out here in California because we are not in a developing region right now. And also, I would say that in California, there is a law, there is a bill signed, SB 596, which demands the net zero scenario for concrete by 2045. So that is also an important thing to know.
Does your work inform those net zero scenarios?
Yes. In our group, we have developed some policies, aided some policymakers.
Is that net zero accomplishment with concrete because we're going to reuse a lot of the concrete? Is it because we're going to apply some of the methods you're talking about?
That bill deals with production of low carbon cement, basically.
So not
all of,
reusability.
no, not really, but it focuses more on like fuel switching and also developing clinker substitution strategies like the LC-free, like new materials. And they will require EPDs for that. Basically labels with like how green is your material to compete in the market.
Do you know what the life of those new materials is compared to concrete?
Yes, they have the same service life.
Same service life?
Yeah, even better sometimes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, you just opened up these questions. I know this wasn't in your research, but one of the things I've wondered about is that in concrete, or in cement manufacturing, making the clinker, a number of these places burn old tires.
Yeah.
And you know, and you can do the conversion between old tires and like natural gas and see, oh, there's a CO2 reduction. But from a life cycle assessment perspective, is burning old tires okay? What happens to old tires if they're not burned?
That is an interesting question. I guess if we don't find other use for those, then we will be accumulating those in landfills. I'll have to check the math, but in my opinion, tires are not going to be any longer in the cement industry.
Tires are what? I didn't.
Are not going to be like part of the future, burning tires. They are very strict with the cement kilns part.
Thank you.
If you were to look at the net zero commitments other states have put in, just or provinces in Canada, right?
Mhm.
And we look at California
Okay.
having this. Where's everybody else in that mix, especially the large growth areas, Texas, Florida, the Southeast? Are they also putting in
I think
protocols to require these types of behaviors?
so. I think California is one of the first ones to do that. I don't believe Texas is doing that right now. But other parts of the world, they are doing it. For example, the UK and Australia, they all have like also Senate bills, also like standards for those materials, for those new materials. California is developing them. In fact, my group is helping them developing those. But I don't expect other states to be as advanced as California in this industry.
But are they coming along? Do you see Massachusetts, Illinois, Wisconsin, anybody else?
Honestly, I haven't checked their situation.
Are any of the new materials promising in terms of cost related to concrete, or are they significantly more expensive projected if they end up being?
Okay, so I did a study of one of those materials called geopolymer, and yeah, I have a published article in that regard. And best case scenario for that was 1.7x. So there is still a cost disparity. But for those we used sometimes like LC-free, it's not that bad. It's just like 1.2, about 1.2 times.
Okay. Is the main cost for concrete and the energy I'm just wondering if
No.
that cost comparison is the same for here versus like China, or because that would change the adoption worldwide.
Yes, they will, because cost is the driver. So if
Okay.
producing that materials, you have more resources, you have more clay in your background, that will be awesome for them.
Okay.
Yes.
So just commenting on that question, with my understanding, and perhaps surprising, but the energy efficiency of the Chinese cement plants is, in general, on average, lower than it is in California. But that's because they've built so many brand new plants to facilitate this growth that they have some, advanced technology and ours is a little bit behind. I think, the people I've talked to about this net zero 2045, a lot of people are very interested in carbon capture with storage, because evidently in the Central Valley, there's a number of pretty good geological sites for putting this carbon down, not far from where the cement is made. So I think that's what a lot of people are thinking about.
I think we have time for one more question.
Oh, always.
You said that for the geopolymer, for example,
Mhm.
the best case scenario cost is around 1.7 times
Yeah.
the concrete. And if you take into account maybe the social cost of carbon,
Yeah, I do.
concrete would be worse, but how much worse is it in your idea?
You can reduce that. I did the social cost of carbon analysis, and I wasn't able to still pair that with concrete.
Concrete was still better in terms of
Yeah,
cost, even
and
after you add
yep,
social cost?
even after that. I know it's not promising, but those are the results.
Well, thank you, Andres.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I appreciate your attention.
So just a little bit of background about myself, and just sort of some context. So I've worked in energy issues, right? I work in conservation issues, but I've worked in energy issues for a long time. So, some of those issues that I worked on, obviously at the state level, including renewal of RPS. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, low carbon fuel standard, all these other issues, or really SB 100, were things that I was working on in my day job. And then as a local elected official and sort of regionally had this opportunity to work on some of these issues more locally. So I think lastly, and just in terms, I think it's important in terms of the local issues here, first of all, I so greatly appreciate UC Davis. I so appreciate the work and research that's done on this campus, because it really helps to inform the legislature and policymakers, Air Resources Board, others. There's lots of connections here, of course, very locally with Air Resources Board and other leaders, who have been very involved for a long time over there. This community of Davis completely punches way above its weight, as it were, in sort of state policy, right? So, I mean, we have the California Energy Commission. 3 of these energy commissioners live in Davis. Shh, don't tell the rest of the state. There's, right, we've had Air Resources Board members, you've had all these folks, many key staff in the legislature and state agencies, Air Resources Board, but many others, Cal EPA, the agencies, wildlife agencies, Caltrans and others all live here. Many of us as a local elected moonlight and occasionally in some of these working for the state and other agencies. So just really keeping that in mind, that the sort of that Davis has this disproportionate influence, Davis and UC Davis campus, disproportionate influence in all sort of matters of state policy. So a little bit more about Valley Clean Energy. So it's as Will sort of teed it up a little bit, it's an effort by our local communities to bring cleaner, more renewable energy at competitive prices to our local communities. It was founded in 2018 officially. We have now today, there's 4 members, Yolo County, but also the cities of Davis, Woodland, and Winters. We have about 2/3 of the load of Yolo County's energy production here, and usage is happening right here we work with Valley Clean Energy on. I think there's an ability to provide an alternative to PG&E. I'll talk about a little bit of that as well, but the ability to source energy locally, we make the decisions on what type of energy is procured, and also we're doing a lot of building production of energy locally and across the state as well. So, I mean, I think really the benefits are a couple things. Competitive rates, we're not there's a lot of regulations that are put on the community choice aggregators across the state. We have, our rates are about, for Care and Farah, so that's the really low income individuals, which is about 25% of our customer base. We're about 3.5% currently lower than PG&E rates. Our just sort of base average other rates are just about 1 or 2% below PG&E. Not that great right now, honestly. There's a lot of reasons for that. The state is, PUC in particular, but the state is putting a bunch of requirements, especially as it relates to RA and other requirements on us that we resource adequacy and other requirements on us that to actually make sure, so we've not had to been able to maximize our rate reductions compared to some of the other CCAs around the state. I think this is the other key for us is the local control part, right? We are really, it's all about being accountable to our ratepayers locally. If you want to have an interaction with the investor-owned utility, you mostly have to go to San Francisco, to PUC, or to their headquarters to have kind of interactions with PG&E. Here, we're electeds that serve on this board from around the region. We are accountable to our voters, and we have, of course, professional staff that are doing a lot of the work on a day-to-day basis, but that's, we do make a lot of these decisions as the board members. Sustainability, I think, is another, obviously big component. Really about reducing greenhouse gas emissions by receiving higher and more renewable, cleaner energy percentages. Talk a little bit more about that as well. And then the customer choice, component as well, choosing how much of your energy comes from cleaner and more renewable sources. So how local oh yeah, of course. Yep.
You said competitive rates, but a few years ago, Valley Clean Energy rates were less than PG&E rates.
Yeah,
Now I think they're identical.
they are lower. We are 2% lower than, we just set our rates, and we're 2% lower than PG&E's rate right now. Not much. Yeah, it's not much lower, but it's 2%. Yeah, it's 2% savings. So, and again, I mentioned the issues around, there's been a lot of requirements that have been coming from especially the CPUC that have made us put a lot more money towards our doing resource adequacy and other things that have not been, so we've not been able to maximize the lowering of the rates as much as we used to be. Yeah, go ahead.
And you mentioned the rates, is that for residential or commercial?
Both.
Across the board?
Yeah, yep, we set, and have that ability. Yeah, go ahead.
Last one on that.
Sure.
The time of use structure, is it similar?
Yes. Yeah, pretty similar. Yeah, and I think that's something that we're certainly seeing more and more adoption. The CCAs are doing that. I mean, sort of mimicking the IOUs basically around the state. Yeah. So I think folks may have already a perfect understanding of this or not, but pretty straightforward, right? The CCA's model is basically the buying and building electricity supply with the CCA, the IOUs still delivering, so the sticks and wires still delivering the energy, as well as, and then the customers obviously on the sort of the end here. I think it's important to note this is obviously not the sort of the full bite at the apple, full municipalization, right? There are a lot of, I think, in my personal opinion, the absolute preferred model in this state would be municipal utilities. I mean, SMUD is the perfect example. Some of the folks in the room may remember way back in the day, we had an attempt at annexation with SMUD that was defeated at the ballot box. It was defeated on the Sacramento side of the river, not on the Yolo side of the river. There was a lot of money spent to stop the annexation of Yolo County into SMUD. It's something that I know that a lot of folks are interested in doing again potentially someday, and we're not sure where SMUD stands on that. SMUD electricity rates are about right now about 45% lower than PG&E's electricity rates. So I think believe me, I feel the same way, and we feel it in our pockets, right, more than anything, and that's the thing I think is really a challenge there. And we want to talk about things like economic development, for example. I mean, if you have 45% more of your electric bill in your pocket as opposed to giving it to the IOU, there's a lot more you can do with that extra money in your own individual lives or as a business owner and such. So that's one of the, I think it's really the gold standard is municipal utilities, of course. And there are obviously a smattering of those, some big and small. SMUD, of course, is obviously very well known. Smaller ones like Healdsburg, Roseville, and others, Palo Alto. But the gold standard, of course, is really, I think, municipal utilities. So it's like, this is like partial bite at the apple, right? But the CCAs, I think, are generally offer a larger share of renewable energy, up to 25% more compared to investor-owned utilities in the same area. So for VCE, our 2023 RPS standard is 54%, but we have a bunch of new renewable projects coming online over the course of the next year. So our 2024 RPS numbers are going to be about 80% in Yolo for VCE on our territory, and then in 2025 it's expected to go up to about 82%. So you sort of compare that to the state right now. State is basically around 36 to 40% range in terms of RPS. If you count clean energy, which includes large hydro and nuclear, that's another 18% there. But it's, in terms of actual RPS standard, we're sort of in that statewide range, about 40%. Yes?
So can I just ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
So if our RPS is trending to 82%, that means 82% of all the kilowatt hours delivered by
VCE.
by your organization
Uh-huh.
are carbon free?
That's correct. Yep, most primarily it's, it's breakdown. There's a slide here in a little bit that has the breakdown. It's primarily, obviously solar. There's some wind, but we have, a bunch of power sources. We've rejected nuclear. There's a whole range of power sources, but yeah, absolutely, that's correct.
Including night?
I'll talk about that as well. That's of course one of the biggest challenges. I mean, is battery storage, right? It's what you do, when the production drops off in the evenings. So yeah, but we're working on battery storage right now, and as are a lot of the other CCAs around the state.
But included in that 82% is night.
It's average. So I mean, I don't, it's over the course of the year, so I don't know. I mean, I could get that. I can get that very specific answer for you. Hey, how are you doing, Dan? But yeah, so happy to follow up there and get more specific detail for you. So no, the answer on this one, VCE does not replace PG&E. I think we're still partners with PG&E, and they're, as an IOU, they're still integral in the whole process, especially owning the infrastructure. There has been a lot of discussion locally in Yolo as well, but in other parts of the state, obviously, about trying to acquire the infrastructure. I think when Valley Clean Energy has done analysis and commissioned analysis to sort of figure out what the cost would be to acquire the infrastructure, PG&E has also done the same. We're talking about electric only, not gas. The numbers are a little different in terms of the estimates. In terms of the estimates of what both entities feel that the value of the sticks and poles and the wires are exactly. So this one is that I was talking when we talked earlier about the power sources. So since the founding in 2018, we're at about 378 or so megawatts of contracts. So including renewables, of course, around the state. This is there's a couple projects, one built in Yolo, one pending in Yolo. Gibson solar and storage project, 13 megawatts of solar PV, 13 megawatts of battery energy storage and systems. So we're seeing, and then we're part owners of a lot of projects around the state. Down in Kings County, down in Kern County, there's a lot of places where we are partial owners of, along with a lot of other CCAs and a bunch of projects around the state. So I think that's something, it's also very typical of a lot of the CCAs. In Yolo County, we have a lot of prime ag land, right? That's a real big priority for Yolo County. So we have decided that we have to tread very carefully as it relates to very large-scale solar siting, for example, here in Yolo. There's just a lot of competing values that exist out there, and that was, I think, the real issue. And I'm going to get in this almost the last slide here to talk about some of the challenges that exist. I think that's one of those real sort of key trade-offs.
Are these projects often funded by these CCNA? Are you guys
Yeah.
a money source that goes into partnership funding?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so of the large renewable projects generating energy in California, do you have any estimate, like how much of them are invested by California aggregators?
I don't know the answer off the top of my head. There are about 25 or so CCAs statewide, and the CCAs actually formed a cooperative, a cooperative to basically build these projects together as well. So many of them are all partial owners.
Are they meaningful?
Yes. Oh yeah.
For this? Like
Yes,
CCAs
millions.
are that?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, millions and millions. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot. Yeah, there's private capital that's coming in, but like CCAs are actually also putting in a lot of capital to do building locally as well. Yes.
I think that of the net renewables, mainly solar and other projects in California, the majority of them are CCS.
Yeah.
So the net new stuff.
Yeah. we can certainly come back to that slide too. I just like looking at all the different projects underway. So just a little bit about CCAs in California too, so have a sense of this, right? So we were now 2002 was when the first original bill was passed, authorizing CCAs in sort of first in the country. We've got other states doing it now too, of course. Illinois, I heard earlier in that last discussion, Illinois, sort of Massachusetts, some of these other states, New York, some of these other states have actually also authorized it, and it's sort of it's spreading across the country as well. But Marin Clean Energy was really the first CCA launched 2010, so 14 years ago now. Then Cal CCA as the sort of statewide agency or organization rather was 2016, and then in 2018 there was a big chunk of CCAs launched, including VCE that year. But now here we are though, 2024, right? I think this is the number, right? 14 million California customers statewide. Clean Power Alliance down in LA County, for example, they're well over 1 million customers. So I mean, there's a lot of growth with CCAs statewide, and it just continues to grow. There are still, again, we talked about challenges, and I think that's really where I want to just sort of end today, which is just around some of the current trends. I mean, this is, I think, so representative of some of the challenges that we face as policymakers. I mean, and folks involved in academia, research, but also in the private sector and the public sector. All the things that are happening at the statewide, sort of in larger scale, statewide, are happening here locally. I think that's the whole point for all of this, is just that we have, there's still a lot of folks are interested in alternatives to the IOUs. That is definitely something we hear a lot from our residents and ratepayers all the time. I mean, even those that are in other parts of the state that only have IOUs. Costs, of course, we'll just leave it there. Costs continue to be an issue, of course. Environmental justice is real. It's something, it's obvious, and it's not been as much of an issue here in Yolo, but it's certainly an issue when there's these discussions about in places like Fresno County, where, for example, Kings County as well, where they've just decided they have a very robust, Kern County as well, very, very robust sort of policy around large-scale siting of infrastructure and solar, especially PV projects. And I think that there's, it's something that we are very mindful of as an agency, and I think it's something that is just something that is, it's also, our policymakers at the state level are also very, very, it's very important to policymakers at the state level as well. The siting of infrastructure is always a challenge. I mean, so when I was mentioning earlier, like the Gibson solar project that we've got here in Yolo County, Yolo County has 9 PG&E substations. Most of them are in the cities. There's 1 or 2 out in the country. The Gibson solar facility that is yet to be built, it's coming online next year in 2025, in battery storage as well. It's basically adjacent to one of our rural PG&E substations out by Madison, the town of Madison, and between Madison and Esparto, up towards the gateway of the Capay Valley. That is a challenge, right? The infrastructure of where it's sited, but also the ability to hook up to the grid is another issue, grid capacity. So these are all things that we are seeing national or statewide, certainly, maybe nationally too, but statewide, and it's a lot of stuff that we're actually having a lot of discussion and debate about locally, and just sort of how to figure out some of these key issues that exist. And then, of course, there's more renewable sources desired. We know that. And we locally are looking for that, but also, and again, there's those trade-offs I was mentioning earlier about agriculture is a perfect example. We have a lot of people who say, well, we want to do more local production, right? I mean, so either large scale, could do more distributed generation too on rooftop solar, but we want to do a lot more larger scale projects. And a lot of folks are saying, well, we want to do that locally. Well, then there's this trade-off. Do we do that locally? And we sort of, again, there's trade-offs around agricultural, especially other trade-offs as well too, like as I mentioned, around the issues of the infrastructure challenges around like substations and such. So I'm pretty much done with that. I think this is something that I think about all the time, this sort of suite of challenges and sort of just current trends. And it's honestly, I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you all today. I had already, before he arrived, saying Dan's praises and his work at the Air Resources Board previously, and what a sort of amazing, cadre of individuals we have and wealth of information and knowledge we have here in Davis that helps direct sort of how California's policy direction takes place. So really, again, with the opportunity to spend some time with you, really appreciate that, and happy to have a discussion and take some questions, additional questions. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
So,
just go down the table, yeah.
Okay, so when by the way, I think the general average person in Davis finds the PG&E bill with the Valley Clean Energy subset like hugely confusing.
Yeah, oh yeah. I think.
Teresa, could you speak up?
Oh, I was just saying, by the way, I think that I've spent some time trying to help general people in PG&E customers or Valley Clean
Yeah.
Energy customers understand their utility bills, because when you get the PG&E layered on top of the Valley Clean Energy, and then you have the net metering
100%.
solar on
Yep.
top of the whole thing, like, people can't make any sense of it anymore.
Absolutely.
Anyway, what I was gonna say was, this idea where you buy the distribution
Yep.
from PG&E, like, has this been done? Is there, like, PG&E in theory can set any price they want, because it's like, there's no competitive market, you can't buy it from somebody else.
Right.
So is there like a legal way to like force a sale at like some third party determined value? Like, how does one like aggressively take the assets? Like,
Yeah.
how does that even happen?
It's a challenge, to say the least. The valuation, these are all public documents. The valuation that we it was sort of come up with for purposes of PG&E's infrastructure in Yolo County was a little, $100 to $150 million. That was the rough estimate. That was Valley Clean Energy's estimate. That was, produced by, third party. PG&E's, estimate is about $300 million. Clearly there was, again, a disparity there. So again, it's really like how, to your point, how do you really know which one is particularly more accurate? That's not, if it were to be, so then there's, I think, a process of negotiation that would occur, of course, in any kind of situation like this. The other issue is that there's not, South San Joaquin Irrigation District, they were successful. It took them over 10 years to do this. There are, again, I think the challenges are great. Doesn't seem to be a lot of will at some of the state agencies to sort of help facilitate this type of a potential transition or change. And so at the moment, we're not pursuing it. We're just like we feel a little stuck. And I think a lot of the others, so again, it's a lot of the other CCAs are interested in doing something similar find themselves in the same kind of situation. My personal opinion, I think, is that we're I think, reaching a tipping point. And especially at least as it relates to the costs of things. There's only so much money people have in their, sort of budgets and daily lives, and we're just continuing to see the costs go up and up and up. And so I think something is going to have to give at some point. I think the other issue around that is, aside from the costs going up, I'm not sure how great the service has been as it relates to the IOUs. And I think there's a lot of demonstrations of, especially the municipal utilities. A lot of them are smaller scale, only individual cities, for example, where their rates are a lot lower, but they also really spend a lot of money investing back in their infrastructure. And I think that is one thing that the IOUs, particularly PG&E, is starting to do more of, but I think didn't do a lot of for a long time. So it's a very challenging sort of current dynamic. So I know that was a lot, but it's just, I think we're really challenged. And you're actually also, lastly, about your point around the confusion of the bills. That is, sadly, that they have been given a lot of leeway to sort of, PG&E has been given, in this case, a lot of leeway to have the bills sort of be this way. It's a partnership in some ways, but it's a relationship. It's not, I'm not sure it's how much of a true strong partnership it is. I think PG&E has not been that excited about, the facilitation of additional sort of, CCAs in the state, so at least in its territory. So.
Yeah, when I analyze my bill, what I can determine is that the electricity cost is like a third of the bill, and then the distribution is like 2/3.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it seems like, and then, I think it's tricky, because even if we fought this battle and we did take over our local grid, right? Like, if essentially all the people in all the populated, wealthy areas do that, then essentially that's going to leave PG&E trying to maintain rural Northern California.
Yep.
And then what happens?
Sure.
So it just seems like there's no good.
Yep.
Seems like there's no good way out of the system we've created.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that.
Anyway.
Yeah. I'm gonna go down the line.
You said that Valley Clean Energy had precluded nuclear. Has the California CCNA, as a state association, also said no nuclear?
They don't make any. It's just a member association of all of the CCAs. Each individual CCA has their choice to do, have the procurement that they want. And so I think many of those 25 CCAs have rejected sort of nuclear, but I think some do. I mean, like Pioneer Community Energy, I think up in the foothills, which is sort of El Dorado and Placer counties currently. I don't know if they still have nuclear, but they are not focused on the renewable components. They're focused on lower rates. That's really just as a sort of values driver. So I mean, I think there's been a number of the CCAs have just sort of either stayed silent or not really taken a stand on that particular issue.
But if it was available, Valley Clean Energy could not source from it. You guys would say, no, that's not as sourceable.
The board has made a decision to not sort of pursue. It was a pretty de minimis amount anyway, but the board has chosen to not do it. We had a lot of input from a lot of community, stakeholders, ratepayers that said we don't think you should have that as part of your power mix. So yeah, so the board I think was trying to be responsive to that. Yeah. Questions? Yeah. Lots of.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about the geothermal projects that you have in your portfolio.
Yeah.
And also, if I understand correctly, they're also located in Nevada. Is that right?
Yeah, I think, let me pull back that slide. Go back. It's very small, and so, let's see. Yeah, it's actually, yes, that Ormat project. Our share, 4.63 megawatts, but it's not yet online. It's anticipated, it's under construction now or in the process of being constructed, and it won't come online until 2026. But a bunch of the CCAs in California are partners in that project. Currently we don't have any real geothermal sort of in our mix right now. So.
And in terms of those geothermal projects, it's like obviously very exciting to see it be energy source.
Yeah.
I'm also just curious if you can speak to it right now. I understand it's not yet online.
Yeah.
Any like transmission challenges that anticipating?
I'm not sure about on the geothermal side of things, but I think if I didn't have transmission on that list of challenges, it's there. I mean, yes, it exists. It must be another challenge that I didn't list among the many challenges that we have around the energy sector these days in California. Yeah, appreciate that though. Thank you. I know there was a couple more back here. Yep.
Could you compare yourself to Sonoma Clean Power?
I don't know 100% off the top of my head, but we're pretty similar. I said they're probably a higher percentage of RPS right now this year. We were about 54% for 2023 purposes, not 2024. But we're going to be going because we have a bunch of resources coming online. We'll be very, very almost identical to Sonoma within the next year or so in terms of their mix. I think one of the things that they're a real leader in, so Sonoma Clean Power is servicing Sonoma and Mendocino counties, and they've been toying with the admission of Lake County to join them as well. They have really, really focused on the transportation sector. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. That's where we all need to be focused. But they have done a lot as it relates to sort of charging infrastructure, especially. The other thing that they've done, it's pretty awesome, is they have created in downtown Santa Rosa a storefront, sort of retail storefront, that it's all about going in and sort of how to electrify your home. And so you literally, as a consumer, go into their storefront and test out all the myriad appliances and everything else, showing folks how to decarbonize the house. And that's something that is like just sort of a value add that they've really done that I think they've gotten a lot of they should get a lot of credit for, but they've gotten a lot of real sort of applause from especially a lot of their ratepayers on. So we haven't been able to, we're not as large as them. I mean, there are a couple counties, and Sonoma's about 500,000 people, and Yolo's again only 250,000 or a little less than 250,000. So, but it's they're really fantastic CCA that a lot of folks are trying to model their operations on.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to lead you to. They have a very nice store.
Yeah.
I mean, you go in and it's helpful. Why don't we have one? Are we in Davis that behind, or?
Yeah, I don't know that it's that behind. I think it's just we've spent a lot of. Your point is very well taken. I see a future community advisory committee member of the Valley Clean Energy Board here. If I'm no, all kidding aside. I mean, first of all, send us that email, right? Send Valley Clean Energy that. Say you want that, right? But please, I mean that very seriously. There's all of our board info is on the site, but send that comment to. The staff at Valley Clean Energy too, because it's one thing for us as board members to raise these types of issues, which we do. We have obviously professional staff that are there on a daily basis, and so I think that believe me, I've been there, I've seen it. I've friends who live in Sonoma County, and I'm like, what? We could be doing this, and I think that would be another sort of value add for if people could go into a downtown storefront in Davis and from soup to nuts know how to sort of decarbonize their home, that would help with the issues of like, the confusing bills and the other stuff. People will be like, well, but there's these other benefits that are being provided by Valley Clean Energy. So,
We maybe have time for one more
Yep.
question, I think.
and I'm happy to stick around a little bit too after if folks have additional questions too. So, go ahead. Yes, sir.
What are you all doing for the 24-hour slice a day?
Did we just take that?
We just got an update on it. It's going to be real. I mean, so there's this pending. We don't know yet. I think is the.
Yeah, I didn't get it either.
What do you, sorry, the question is resource adequacy.
Yep.
And resource adequacy is a requirement from the CAISO such that load-serving entities like CCAs, utilities, munis, et cetera, have to procure enough capacity, so megawatts, not megawatt hours, for a given time period, right? So
Yep.
usually it was like peak hours, now
Yep.
they're doing slice of days.
For 24.
Every 24-hour period.
Yeah.
So you need to have a certain amount of capacity, right, that you contracted with in order to ensure there's enough capacity on the grid, right?
Yep.
This is mostly to ensure we don't go over our peak, right?
Yep.
Those brownouts. And so it's an issue because there's not a lot of the resources that qualify.
Yep.
And so it's this game of musical chairs.
Yep.
And it's made more difficult because they're disaggregated into tinier and tinier slices.
Yes.
And that's hard.
Yeah, it's pending. So that's a pretty solid synopsis of what the slice of day stuff is. I think we're struggling with it because we don't have a lot of gaps currently. I think the CCAs are having a conversation about sort of an ability to sort of like share resources. I think that's really and whether or not that will be an adequate solution for the PUCs sort of proceeding on it, I'm not sure. It's a real challenge. We literally just at our last board meeting had a very a preliminary but long presentation and also just sort of initial discussion on sort of how we're going to respond to that. I think it's when we were it was the question earlier about why are the rates not lower? They used to be lower. Absolutely. This is another example of that. If we were going to have to spend a lot of money to sort of fill this need around a new PUC requirement on slice of day issues, we'll have to figure out if can we do as deep of a rate dive compared to the IOU. So that's just a real again it's these trade-offs, and we're really trying to just sort of see how we're going to approach it. I think again the biggest answer though is really just like it's a wait and see at the moment. Just we're trying to figure out if again the PUC will allow for the CCAs to sort of share resources and sort of be able to help cover each other a little bit, or if that'll be an acceptable usage. So. But appreciate all of the questions. Fantastic. Really, really, really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you today. Thank you. Yeah.